What's up guys, I'm back today with another video for you. Today I'm working with the Futaba GYD 550 gyro. In my opinion, this gyro is one of the best, if not the best gyro on the RC drift market currently. Its price tag is high, probably the most expensive gyro for drifting at the moment I think, but well worth the price if you ask me. It is one of the most adjustable gyros, allowing you to really fine tune it and dial it into the way that you want to make the car drive. A lot of people who take what I just said, run with it, and pick one up before doing any research often cannot get over the learning curve needed to make it work for them, or end up getting the wrong hardware to use it, so that's why I'm here again. Today I'm going to show you initial setup on the gyro, a bit of explanation of all the settings and what you need to know to make this gyro one of the best mods you've ever done to your car. So sit back and enjoy another Mitch Beck class of RC drift knowledge. So the first thing we need to know before even buying this gyro is that you'll need a Futaba 4PM, 7PX, 7PXR, or 10PX to be able to adjust all the settings. You'll also need a R334 or R404 receiver. You will not be able to access any settings on the gyro without one of these receivers. Once you have those situated, you can go ahead and pick up the gyro. The first place to start with any gyro is installation. I've always preferred mounting gyros on the lower deck as close to the middle of the chassis as I can. I've felt some weird things in the steering mounting gyros on the upper deck of some cars before. Places you really don't want to mount gyros are on the top of the servo. You can get a lot of vibrations from the servo transmitting to the gyro that will give you that classic gyro shake. You also don't want to mount it near the motor for the same reason. You can pick up some vibrations from the motor. You also don't want to mount it on its side, just flat on the base of the gyro. This can depend on which gyro you have, so refer to your user manual for correct gyro mounting orientation, but at least for the GYD 550, you want to mount it flat, which is why I usually choose the lower deck for mounting. I would only mount the gyro on your upper deck if you really don't have any room on your lower, which would be a pretty rare case with such a small footprint on the 550. Most lower decks have plenty of room. Next is your choice of mounting tape. Now the GYD 550 comes with a few pieces of this Futaba brand gyro tape. This is some of the best tape I have found for mounting gyros, and I would highly suggest everyone to use it or something similar for your gyros. I've seen gyros with multiple layers of clear double-side tape under them that had since gone hard and brittle and caused some pretty serious shaking in the servo. Replaced it with a single piece of soft foam tape and those shaking problems went away instantly, so these days I only use Futaba gyro tape or some of the soft foam 3M tape that comes with some of the ESCs for my gyros. I know some of you like to really wire tuck your chassis, but when I mount my gyros, I try to have any buttons or switches accessible. You never know when you might need to get to them later on, especially any gyro endpoint buttons. So here's where I have my gyro mounted on my MC1, close to the receiver, so I was able to make my own short male-to-male servo wire to lessen the wiring up, but I still have full access to the button on it. On the gyro, we have 3 slots. We have RX, GN, and SX. Your RX port will take one of the included male-to-male connectors and will connect to your receiver. The GN port will take another male-to-male connector and connects to your channel 3 port on the receiver for remote gain control, and the SX port will take the male connector wire from your servo. I have my servo into SX, and you'll notice that my GN port is empty. With the GYD 550 and the R334 and R404 receiver, you can actually connect the RX port to the S-Bus port on the receiver, and you won't need to use a channel 3 plug to remote control gain, which saves you some wiring. Another benefit of setting your GYD 550 up through S-Bus is that you get 5 different gyro profiles you can save on your remote. Useful if you travel to different track surfaces often. That way you don't need to adjust your settings each time you go to a different track. Here's the bottom of my remote and all the different tracks and settings I have my remote set up with. I actually have both my GYD 550 and Accuvan CSC tied into the S-Bus port together, utilizing Futaba's dual hub, so I have my 5 saved track profiles along with wireless tuning and telemetry for the Accuvans. However, if you run a Futaba servo such as the CT500 or CT700 with the GYD 550 and you're looking to tune the servo wirelessly through S-Bus, you will have to use the GN port to channel 3 and RX port to channel 1 on the receiver, and you will lose the 5 savable gyro profiles. If you want to continue using the 550 on S-Bus, you'll have to connect your Futaba servo to your COM port if you want to tune the settings. Now that we have everything plugged in, we'll go over the initial setup. So we have a few initial settings on the gyro that need to be set properly before you can drive the car. We have servo type, gyro reverse, neutral setting, and limit setting. Before we get into these settings, I'm going to turn the car on now to go over an important step to take every time you power the car on before you drive. You must let the gyro initialize for a few seconds on a flat surface before you drive off. Watch the front wheels for a little twitch after you power on, and then you're good to go after that. If we look on the gyro, you'll see a red or green LED on. Green signifies normal gain mode, and the red light signifies AVCS gain mode. If the LED is off, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and assign channel 3 control to what you want to use to control the gyro gain. I have mine set on the DL1 dial on my 7PXR. Now, I remember seeing in one of the update manuals Futaba stating that gyro mixing is required to use the gyro, and then you would assign your dial to gyro control, but honestly, I've never used gyro mixing. I've never took the time to figure out what it all does, and my gain control has worked fine using channel 3 control. As well as using channel 3 control, I'm able to turn the dial from negative 100% to 0 to positive 100% to switch between normal and AVCS, even though I'm pretty much fully AVCS mode these days. With gyro mixing, I saw that you had to open the gyro mixing menu to manually switch between normal and AVCS mode. So with all that said, use whatever you're comfortable with. Either setup should work fine. With our gain turned up in either normal or AVCS mode, I'm going to swing the rear of the car out to check the gyro direction. I can see that it's reversed, so I'm going to need to reverse that setting in the gyro. Now we can get into the initial setup. So we know that the gyro needs to be reversed. We'll keep that in mind. The first setting that is in the setting process is the servo type. Now, this gyro is only compatible with digital servos. Futaba states that it is only compatible with Futaba digital servos, but me, as well as some of my team drivers, have not had any major issues using it with a number of different brand servos, such as the RST that I have on my car here, as well as Yokomo servos. The servo type setting can be set between normal digital servos, which is the default setting, or SR mode or super response servos. The SR mode setting will only be for Futaba SR compatible servos, and you will also need the SR setting enabled on the servo and receiver as well. SR mode cannot be used while using the GYD 550 on S-Bus unless you have a 10PX and R404 receiver. So with the car on and the gyro initialized, I'm going to hold the button down on the gyro. You'll see the LED flash once for setting 1, and you'll let go. A green light is for normal servos, and red light is for SR servos. So we'll go ahead with the green LED here since I have a Rev D servo. Now we can hold the button down again and let go on the double flash. Now we're adjusting the second setting. This is the gyro reverse. We remember that we needed to reverse the gyro direction. Green light is the normal default setting and red is reverse, so we're going to go ahead and switch to the reverse setting. Now we can see the gyro is functioning in the correct direction. Now we can hold the button down again and wait for the triple flash and release. The third setting is the gyro neutral setting. Here we can set the center point that the gyro will make the servo sit at. This is why it's important to have all your trims and endpoints set at default for your remote, since the gyro will override any of those settings anyways. So we can take a look at the steering and we can make some adjustments to the center of the steering. We make these adjustments with the steering wheel and the remote. Once we get the center point straight, we can move on to the next setting. Hold the button down again and wait for 4 flashes. Now we're in the limit setting mode. This is where we set the endpoints on the gyro. We can adjust these the same as the neutral settings with the remote steering wheel. First we'll click the gyro button once. The wheels will turn all the way one way, and we'll use the wheel to adjust where we want our steering to stop. Do the same for the other side. After we're done, click it one more time. And they're set. That's all the settings, so now we just power cycle the ESC to save all the settings. We can also make all of these changes from the GyroLink menu on the remote. You have your limit setting here. A is your left side point and B is your right side. We have neutral setting, gyro reverse, SR mode, as well as some response and gain mode settings that I'll get into later. Now we're going to get into the settings. I guess I can start with the gain types since I've already mentioned them but haven't given an explanation yet. There is normal mode and AVCS mode. Here is Futaba's official explanation of the two settings, but I would take this with a grain of salt as it can depend on your personal settings on how the car drives. I recently made the switch from normal to AVCS within the last few months using a baseline setting from Miko Yang of Team D Style in SoCal and adjusted it to my preference, and I feel like my car drives like it did when I was in normal mode, but requiring less corrections and smaller corrections to put my car where I want it to go. In AVCS, I still countersteer quite a bit, which counters Futaba's explanation of how AVCS should work, but with close to factory AVCS settings, I really felt like I had to steer into the turn to keep the car at the right angle, so it all really depends on your personal settings. So this is Futaba's official explanation of all the other settings of the 550. Unfortunately, this manual is not included with the gyros for some reason. I actually found this excerpt while looking through the firmware update manual for the 4PM and 7PX. You can pause here and read a bit into their explanations, and I'll supplement it with my views on how the settings work for me, as well as show some driving examples of the settings adjusted to their extremes. The first setting is damper. Your damper is like the anti-shake setting you have on the Yokomo servos, as well as the RevD RSST servo that has a damper function. The damper combats hunting, which is the technical term for the well-known gyro shake and rear-wheel drive RC drifting that happens from high gain or from some of the lower-end servo and gyros. Use a higher damper setting if you experience hunting, adjusting up until your car doesn't hunt anymore. However, a higher damper will slow the servo speed down. A lower damper will provide a more direct feel to your steering with better response at the cost of hunting if it's set too low. There's also a second damper setting that can only be accessed with the gyro button. With the gyro on, press the button once. You'll see the light on the gyro flash a number of times. This is the secondary damper level. You can click once again in this mode to increase the damper one level all the way up to 8, where it will go back to level 1. 1 being the lowest damper setting and 8 being the highest damper. This setting is available on normal and AVCS. Whichever mode that you currently have the gyro in is the mode that it'll adjust the damper on. The next setting is damper point. The damper point is obviously related to the damper. It's the point at which the damper activates in the steering to slow the servo speed and suppress the servo hunting. Setting this point higher can give a direct steering feel to your actions on the remote with quick response, but can lead to some hunting. A lower damper point will decrease response time from your remote to the wheels actually turning, but has a better chance at suppressing any hunting on the servo. The third setting is steering control gain. My personal setting for this is to max it out at 100. This usually feels best for me. Once when tuning at my local concrete track, I found that I could not steer my full angle at low speeds without raising it, so having it set low made it extremely difficult to U-turn my car from a dead stop. Honestly, I don't have much of an explanation for this one, but it seems like most of these settings revolve around how responsive certain aspects of the gyro become based off your settings. Like I said, I usually max this out on any GYD 550S setup. The last major setting on the 550, and probably the most adjusted aside from the damper, is the tail slide speed. This will control how fast the rear end of the car slides out, a higher value for a faster rear end, and a lower value for a slower swinging rear end. What I have noticed is damper point can dictate how fast your car initiates, and tail slide speed is how fast the car will rotate after your initiation and the car is set mid-corner. There is also turn and return. Turn meaning how fast the servo will turn to full lock, and return being how fast the servo returns to center after turning full lock and letting go of the steering. For these, my personal preference is to leave them both at 100 on my MC1. One of my team drivers recently finished a scale AE86 RC drift build with very low power, and I was helping him with the grip feeling in the steering one night. I had suggested slowing the steering speed down a bit because for me it was tough to find front grip in the car because the servo would turn full lock too quickly and would understeer. By slowing the steering speed down, it would essentially give the tires time to maintain grip as they traveled through the steering stroke instead of instantly going full lock where we're using plastic tires that would understeer in those conditions. As he adjusted his return speed, it would adjust the way the car transitioned. If you can imagine, when your car transitions through turns, the servo has to go from turning one way to returning back to center and then turning the other way, so adjusting the return speed can alter how the car transitions. If you have a 7 or 10 PX, you also have steering gain curve on this second page. I really don't mess with the curve, but the way it works is you have 8 points that you can set your gain at. I have these set linearly for you so that you can see. As I highlight each point, you can see this dotted line highlight each point in the curve. If you steer the wheel, you'll see this red line travel to each point on the curve. Each of these adjustable points represents a percentage on the gyro gain that it will drop to at that point in the steering stroke. I thought this might work like the curve in the RevD RevOx gyro, but since it's steering based, it doesn't, so I usually leave all of these points at 100. Now I'll get my car on the track and give you guys some examples of each setting the best I can. I thought our scale track would be a great place to showcase some of these settings. It's a tight and technical track that can be run in all sorts of layouts right now since no one is here, and I can show you some areas that really show the difference in some of the settings. So I'm going to start with damper. I have it set really low at 5 on the gyro, and my RSST damper is also set pretty low so I can show you. You can see it really hunting coming down this straight section here. Now I'm going to turn it up to 25. Now you can see a lot less hunting. I didn't really feel much change in the handling with this much increase, but keep in mind the higher your damper, the slower your servo speed will be, and if you have damper set too high, you can also start to heat your servo up. Next is damper point. I'm starting with it pretty low for me at 25. The front end feels very responsive with a lot of front grip. Almost too responsive if it's too low. As you can see, I kind of crashed there a bit because the front transitions so fast. Lower your damper point if you feel like your car needs to transition faster and if you experience hunting. Having a lower damper point can lessen hunting to a certain extent. A low damper point like this can be useful for small, tight tracks where you need to make a lot of quick and snappy transitions like this. Now I'm going to try a high damper point at 70. You can see the speed of the car's rotation is a bit slower, but the car feels overall more stable and less likely to over-rotate compared to when I'm turning the wheel and how much. You might also experience a little hunting in the front wheels if you have this set too high and your damper too low. I would say start on the high side and lower it until your car is responsive but doesn't rotate too fast for you and there's no visible hunting. So I usually drive with my steering control gain all the way at 100. I have it set to 25 right now. The car feels so slow to rotate. And you can see I'm turning the wheel full lock on transitions, and it's taking forever to change directions. It feels like the gyro gain is set like at 150%. Now I'm going to turn it back to 100. This feels much better. Having the steering control gain high feels like it maintains the response of the gain percentage you have your gyro set at. I'm testing all of these settings in normal mode at 70% gyro gain, and this pretty much feels like a real 70% gain that I'm used to. So tail slide speed is probably the easiest to understand while tuning. If I turn it down, the car rotates slow. If I turn it up, the car rotates fast. Adjust it to where you're comfortable with driving the car at. I'm starting at 10 here. It also depends on where you tune with your gain set at. Personally, I like to tune with my gain set around 70% on normal mode, and my AVCS gain is at about 25% right now. This way I can adjust the gain up or down if I need to adjust my gyro feeling linearly. Some people I know tune at a higher gyro gain and their tail speed ends up being really high compared to mine. Doesn't really matter how you tune as long as the car feels good for you. Now I'm bumping it up a lot to 120. The car rotates a lot faster now, almost a bit too fast for me. I usually run about 40 tail slide speed with these current settings. So now I can go over the steering speed and return. I have turn all the way down at 8 on the GYD 550 right now. That's the lowest you can have them at. I noticed a bit more snappy response through that smaller section than I'm used to. Again, that's probably from what I explained earlier. Having it slowed down a bit keeps the wheels from turning too far all at once and understeering, so the tires are given time to keep the grip through sharp transitions like that. Helps with the aggressive flicks like that too. Now I'm going to turn it back up to 100. Yeah, now it feels a bit more stable, but less aggressive in the initiation and transitions. You definitely have to use more throttle in the small section to get the car to change directions quickly. Now we can look at return. Return speed I have all the way down again at 80. I'm just paying attention to my transition speed through this small section mainly, and this flick, because like I said earlier, your return speed will mostly influence your transitions as your servo works to travel from one side of the throw to the other.
Now I'm turning it back up to 100. It's not overly noticeable to me driving, but maybe to you watching, you might see that I lost a bit of response and speed in the transition, so maybe you can pick up some transition speed by having the return speed lowered a bit. So while I was filming this bit, I did some more experimenting with the steering gain curve. First, I set it up on a linear curve, decreased in the first point of the steering, and then increasing later on in the steering. This didn't really work that well, and then I thought about it for a second and how you steer during this small section on this track, and it made more sense to reverse the curve and have the gain lowered at max steering, and then increase as you return back to center, so then I was left with this. Now when I turn fully to make a transition or aggressive initiation, it lowers the gain, and I can get those really fast direction changes while still maintaining a higher gain to keep the car stable and easy to drive for small corrections. Now I'm going to return it back to default with every point at 100. It's easy to feel the difference going back to this setup. Even turning fully, you still retain that high gain and lowered response, so the curve could be very useful for tight and technical tracks if you know how to set it up to your driving preference. So now I'm going to go over response mode. The response mode controls the response time or deadband or neutral width of the steering. And according to Futaba, the high setting speeds up the response and decreases the deadband, and the low setting slows the response and increases the deadband. I'm going to start with the low setting. It feels like the front end is pretty snappy, but I think this is just due to the lowered response time. I would rather tune this feeling in with other settings and maintain a quicker response time in the steering. Now I'll switch it back to the high response I usually drive on. The middle setting we can assume sets your response somewhere between low and high. The transition time feels similar, but now my steering feels more connected to the car. Since I'm a fairly seasoned driver, I much prefer to drive with a high steering response like this, so my car steers when I tell it to. It's all preference though, and you should mess with all these settings to find what works best for you. The last setting we'll look at is the gain mode. This basically just adjusts the overall sensitivity of your gyro gain by a multiplier. I'm going to start here in standard. You'll see my car is rotating pretty quickly and rotating more than it will once I switch it. I tuned my whole setup on high already, so I usually leave this on high, but you can start on standard if you want, and if you end up using a gain near 100%, I'd switch to high, and then you should be able to bring your gyro gain down. Now I'll switch it back to high. Now it looks like my car stabilized out a bit, as basically it's increased the gyro gain by 1.5 times according to Futaba.
So that concludes my video on the GYD 550. Again, really great gyro. The best on the market in my opinion if you can get over the learning curve that comes with one. Hopefully this helped you understand the settings more so that you can get yours dialed into your personal driving preference, or if you've been thinking of picking one up. I've been pumping these videos out like crazy for you guys lately, trying to cover some of the major points of interest in RC drift right now, so you'll probably see me on here again soon. Bye for now.